Kali Linux comes pre-installed with a bunch of tools, from information gathering to password attacks, from reverse engineering to forensics tools. But what do these tools actually do, and what are they used for? In this video, I want to look specifically at password attacks. I'm going to briefly explain what each of these tools actually does, and even if you're likely to never use any of these applications at all, I reckon it's still real interesting to know what on earth they're used for. So let's take a closer look, right after this. Maltronics.com is where you can find the latest of hacker hardware, from Wi-Fi deauthors to Arduino keystroke injectors, Wi-Fi keyloggers, and USB protectors. It is run by myself, so do give it 2 minutes of your time. You're guaranteed to like our tech. Maltronics.com, link is in the description. Without further ado, the first tool on our list is Cool, as in cool, not cool. Cool is a custom word list generator, used for building dictionaries for password attacks. The idea is you give it a URL, as well as specify a few parameters. Cool will then crawl the site looking for words which match your parameters. Here I've specified a minimum word length of 6 characters and instructed Cool to spider 3 pages deep. And by that I mean it'll go through all the links on pages it visits until it's 3 pages deep, and then it'll just spit out a file with all the words it's found. The point of this is that passwords are often very predictable. If you're tasked with pen testing, say, I don't know, a forum dedicated to breeding cats, there's a good chance an admin's password will contain their favorite cat breed. By crawling a site, you can pull out all the various words specific to a niche and use those in a dictionary attack. Next up, Crunch. Crunch similarly is a dictionary builder. However, this works specifically with criteria we specify. So, for example, if we wanted to generate a word list for our cat breeding admin, we could run something like this. This will generate a word list of words 8 characters long using the key space 123 exclamation mark. The generated words will all start with tabby, but the last 3 characters will be made up of our key space that we just specified. Then it'll all be stored in list.txt. So this will generate all possible permutations, which in this case is only 64 different possibilities. Of course, there are a lot more interesting things you can do with Crunch. You could, for example, pipe in the words we found with Cool to generate an even more expansive dictionary. Staying with felines, Hashcat is up next. Hashcat, as far as I can gather, is the gold standard password cracking tool. If you have a hash to crack, Hashcat likely has you covered. It supports both GPU and CPU based cracking. I used it in a previous video where I brute forced WPA2 passwords using the fact that the key space used in default passwords is just so god awful. Hashcat supports a plethora of hash types, over 100. For a super simple example, we can try brute forcing a basic MD5 hash. Now, I understand this isn't much of a real world example, but it gives you an idea for how Hashcat works. So this will use attack mode 3, which is a brute force. It specifies that we're using hash type 0, which is MD5. We then give our hash, and specify that we want to use the built-in class set of lowercase a through z characters, specifically 8 of these characters. And given this is such an insecure password using MD5, we get our result pretty quickly. And there you have the password in all its glory. Password. The next 2 tools are John and Johnny. Johnny is just a GUI for John, so I'm going to leave that one out. John, short for John the Ripper, is much like Hashcat, used for cracking passwords. But they both use different approaches to achieve the same end goal, though John the Ripper has been around for much, much longer. Which is better? That's a very nuanced question. 10 minutes of the most intense Googling couldn't come up with a definitive answer, so we may never know. Your best bet is to decide case by case based on what you're trying to crack and what equipment you have to do that with. Next, Medusa is a network-based login brute forcer. It's not always possible to extract a hash to crack in Hashcat or John the Ripper. Sometimes it's necessary to attempt to brute force a network login, for example an FTP login, MySQL, HTTP, or an SSH password prompt. This does have a few disadvantages. Network speeds can be slow, after a few attempts you could be logged out, or there may be cooldowns on guesses. But anyway, for an example, we can run this. This attempts to run a dictionary attack against an SSH password prompt, with a given username and dictionary of potential passwords. We are doing this against a local host, so maybe a little pointless, but you get the idea. This VM is pretty poorly configured, and as you can see, the password was found to be the default Tor. Offcrack is pretty similar to Medusa. They both do the same general job, but with their own set of nuances. You could have run that SSH dictionary attack with Offcrack just by varying the syntax a little. Next up, what I can only presume is pronounced Offcrack. Now, this one is pretty interesting. Offcrack is a Windows password cracker that does its job using rainbow tables. It also runs on Windows and Mac and has a GUI. Now, I mentioned Offcrack uses rainbow tables. Rainbow tables are pretty esoteric, so I won't dive too deep into what they are, though essentially rainbow tables provide a trade-off between computing hashes in real time and using a hash table. They don't require as much time as computing hashes one by one does, but they don't require as much space as hash tables do. Rainbow tables are a compromise on each front. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description if you want a more thorough explanation. Anyhow, Offcrack. To use it, you'll need to download some of their rainbow tables, which work all the way up to Windows 7 only. As well as that, you'll need to extract the hash from a target machine via a variety of methods. Now, I couldn't help but notice that one of the developers here is actually credited with the invention of the rainbow table itself. Moving swiftly on, Pirate is a tool for creating databases of pre-computed WPA and WPA2 PMKs. Now, you could of course just use Offcrack or Hashcat each time you want to crack open a Wi-Fi network, though that can take a lot of time. However, with Pirate, you can just pre-compute these PMKs. Now, the catch here is that PMKs are derived from both the SSID and PSK. So if you've built a database based on one SSID, then it won't work for another SSID. Though given just how common network names are reused, it may make sense for a pen tester to keep a few of these databases handy. This one's a little involved, so I'll leave a link to a tutorial in the description if you're interested in giving Pirate a go. Next on the agenda, Rainbow Crack. As the name suggests, this has something to do with the rainbow tables we spoke about previously. Rainbow Crack is simply put a general purpose implementation of this technique. It's used for creating rainbow tables as well as using them to crack hashes. Now, you'd best know a bit about rainbow tables before you touch this tool. The documentation, while thorough, doesn't explain the maths behind rainbow tables, which you kind of need to have some level of a grasp over in order to use this tool. RCracky-MT, if that's how you pronounce it, is a modified version of Offcrack, which is part of Rainbow Crack. It just adds a few new features, such as multi-core support, so I'm going to skip over it. And finally, last but by no means least, is word lists. Now, this is not an application in the slightest, but rather just a link to a directory which contains the RockU password dictionary, which is a very popular list of common passwords. It also links to other dictionaries stored throughout Kali. So thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed making this video. If you liked this format, let me know which category of Kali tools you want me to take a look at next. If you have any suggestions, did I miss something important, what improvements can I make, let me know down in those comments. And as always, stay tuned for more hacking videos. Have a good one.